Chapter 2, Searching for Nellie. Days and days went by, but Nellie never came. There was no note, no message, no word at all from her. Every afternoon, Samantha hurried home from school and sat, waiting, in the front parlor. She pretended to do her schoolwork, but really she stared out the window, hoping to see Nellie coming toward her, but she saw only strangers. Her hopes faded as each bright afternoon faded into gray twilight. She read Nellie's letter over and over again, adding up the days in her head. One day for Nellie to pack, one day to travel, one day with her uncle. Samantha began to worry. Maybe something had happened. Maybe Nellie was sick with the flu again. Maybe Mrs. Van Sicklen wanted her to stay in Mount Bedford, or maybe her uncle wouldn't let her come to visit. Something had to be wrong, because if Nellie was in New York, Samantha knew that she would keep her promise. The first few evenings, as his Uncle Gard came in the door, he asked about Nellie. Did she come today, Sam? But after a while, he didn't need to ask. He could tell the answer was no by the disappointed look on Samantha's face. One night after dinner, Uncle Gard said, "Tonight we telephone Mrs. Van Sicklen and find out where Nellie and her sisters are." "That's a good idea," said Aunt Cornelia. "Telephone?" asked Samantha. "But it's all the way to Mount Bedford. That's long distance." "Well, what else do we have a newfangled contraption like the telephone for?" asked Uncle Gard. Samantha and Aunt Cornelia followed Uncle Gard into the hallway and watched as he cranked the telephone. "Operator," he shouted into the mouthpiece. "Hello, operator? I want to speak to the Van Sicklen residence in Mount Bedford, please." Samantha heard some loud crackling on the line. Then Uncle Gard shouted, "Mrs. Van Sicklen, please. Mrs. Van Sicklen? Gardner Edwards here. No, nothing's wrong. Sorry to alarm you by telephoning. We're wondering where Nellie is. Nellie, your little maid, and her sisters Bridget and Jenny." Uncle Gard paused, but his voice was serious. "2 weeks ago, I see. Well, do you happen to know their uncle's exact address?" No. I don't suppose he has a telephone. No, I thought not. Well, thank you, Mrs. Van Sicklen. I'll ring off now. He turned the crank, hung up an earpiece, then looked at Samantha. "Mrs. Van Sicklen says the girls left Mount Bedford 2 weeks ago. She put them on the train herself. The uncle's name is Mike O'Malley. Mrs. Van Sicklen didn't know his exact address, but she thinks he lives somewhere near the river on 17th or 18th Street. They left Mount Bedford 2 weeks ago," repeated Samantha. Why hasn't Nellie come to see me in all that time? "Nellie may be working," Uncle Gard said, or maybe she's too busy looking after Bridget and Jenny." Samantha felt desperate. "Can't we try to find them? If we could just find where Nellie's uncle lives." "Samantha," Aunt Cornelia interrupted gently, "New York is a big place. It would be very hard, probably impossible, to find Nellie's uncle by just wandering around. I'm afraid all we can do is wait for Nellie to come to us." "Don't give up hope, Sam," said Uncle Gard. "Nellie will come one of these days. I'm sure she will." He tried to turn his worried frown into a smile, but Samantha could tell by his voice that Uncle Gard wasn't really sure Nellie would come. Samantha was quiet for a moment. She was thinking hard. Then she said, "Thank you for telephoning, Uncle Gard." She climbed up the stairs to her room. With each step, she was more determined. She didn't care how hard it would be. She was going to find Nellie, and she would go the very next day. After school the next afternoon, Samantha set off under the heavy gray sky. She was more than a little nervous. In just a few blocks, she was in a part of the city she had never seen before. But she followed the street signs carefully and found 17th Street without any trouble. A strong wind at her back seemed to push her right to it. But after she had walked toward the river for 5 or 6 blocks, 17th Street changed. Samantha had to jostle her way down the icy, muddy middle of the street because the sidewalks were blocked with push carts. The carts were piled high with potatoes, baskets, brooms, and buckets. The air was so full of the smell of fish and smoke, it seemed as dense as fog. There were so many people. Women dressed all in black with shawls over their heads, poked at the things on the carts. Silent men stood next to small fires, rubbing their hands. Packs of raggedy-looking boys ran through the crowd. Samantha began to feel as small and timid as a mouse in the hubbub around her. All the noise and strangeness was frightening, but she could not turn back. It's a good thing there are so many people out on the street, she said to herself bravely. Someone here must know Nellie's uncle. But the cold that was chilling her hands and feet seemed to be freezing up her courage too. When she saw steam rising from a cart of roasted chestnuts, she decided to get some because they looked so nice and hot. Samantha handed the chestnut man a penny. As he gave her the bag of nuts, he said, "There you are, missy. The chestnuts will cheer ye. Put 'em in your muff to warm up your hands." His sing-song accent reminded Samantha of the way Nellie's father had talked. "Please, sir," she said, "do you know Mr. O'Malley?" The man grinned. "Sure, and there are many O'Malleys, miss. Which one would you be wanting?" "Mr. Mike O'Malley," said Samantha. "He lives on 17th or 18th Street." The grin vanished from the man's face like a light blown out by a cold wind. And what would a young missy such as yourself be wanting with a hooligan like Mike O'Malley?" he asked. "My friend Nellie, his niece, is with him," said Samantha. "Please, do you know where he lives?" The man thought for a moment, then he said, "Last I heard he was living, if you can call it that, over on 18th Street, above the shoemaker." "Thank you," said Samantha. "Mind you be careful," warned the chestnut man as Samantha hurried away. She walked fast, but she was worried. Was Nellie's uncle a bad man? The chestnut man had called him a hooligan. Samantha was not sure what a hooligan was, but she was quite sure she did not want to meet one. Only the idea of finally seeing Nellie kept her going. By now she was expert at dodging people in carts. In no time she rounded the corner and found the shoemaker's shop on 18th Street. There, outside the shop, she stopped. She stood silently staring at the building. If this where Nellie lives? She wondered. The building was gloomy and horrible. It was falling apart and looked as if they were too tired to stand up anymore. Tattered laundry hung from the windows like grimy flags of defeat. Samantha did not want to go in a dark doorway, but she thought, maybe Nellie has to go in this doorway every single day. Maybe Nellie is inside there right now. She climbed the steps and went inside. The door slammed shut behind her as if the building was swallowing her whole. The hallway smelled like rotting garbage. It was so dark Samantha could hardly see. She held her breath and started up the creaky steps. Suddenly, at the top of the steps, a door flew open and a woman stuck her head out. "What do you want?" she asked in a hard voice. Samantha froze. I'm looking for Mr. Mike O'Malley," she croaked. "Hist," frowned the woman. "You'll not find him here, I'm happy to say. Now go away." She started to close the door. "Please, ma'am," said Samantha. "I was told he lived here. I've got to find him. He's got Nellie and—" "Nellie?" asked the woman. She stopped closing the door. A little face appeared at her knees, peeking around her skirts, smiling at Samantha. The woman scooped up the baby and opened the door a bit wider. "Is it Nellie you're looking for?" "Yes," said Samantha. The woman still didn't smile, but she said, "Come along in then, quickly now." Samantha stepped inside. She stood awkwardly near the door in a small room. It was not much lighter than the hallway, but it was scrubbed clean. It was more crowded than any room Samantha had ever seen. It was everything at once. One part was a kitchen. There were beds and chairs pushing together to make beds in each corner. In the middle of the room, there was a wooden table where 6 children sat. They were making flowers out of paper. They all looked up shyly at Samantha, but their fingers never stopped twisting the colorful paper onto wire stems. It seemed odd to see the bright blossoms in the middle of the dark, cheerless room. "All right, children," said the woman kindly. "Gawking won't get the work done faster, will it?" She bounced the baby on her hip while she told her story. "That Mike O'Malley," she said, as if the name were a curse. "He did live here, and drinking was all he was good for. You'll pardon me saying, miss, that about 2 weeks ago, the 3 girls came to live with him. Good, polite girls they were, too. And if Mike O'Malley didn't take all of their money and anything else they had, and run off. He left them all alone in that room upstairs. They had nothing to eat and nowhere to sleep but a bare floor. Well, the oldest one, that Nellie, was as bright as a child as I've ever seen. She tried to clean up the place and make it decent, but they couldn't stay there with no coal for fire and not 2 pennies to rub together. So I took them in here." But we're crowded in here already, as you can see, the woman said, so I had to take Nellie and her sisters to the orphanage. They sat down to work, and there was never a word of complaint from one of them. But we're crowded in here already, as you can see. After about a week, Nellie said they couldn't stay and be eating our food any longer. So I did the only thing I knew to do. I took them to the orphanage, where at least they'll be safe and warm and fed and get some schooling. And didn't it break my heart to see them go? They're gone? Asked Samantha. To an orphanage? Yes, said the woman. Over on 20th Street. It's called Cold Rock House for Homeless Girls. She shook her head. They got no one left in the world to care for them now, poor things. Though you mark my words, they're better off without that good-for-nothing uncle. Samantha couldn't believe what she had heard. Nellie and the girls were in an orphanage. Cold Rock House didn't sound very warm or welcoming, but it had to be better than living with her Uncle Mike. Thank you, Samantha said to the woman. Now I know where to find Nellie. Thank you for being so kind. It's the least I could do for the dear girls, said the woman. If you see Nellie and the little ones, give them my best love and say I still think of them and wish I could do more for them myself. Samantha shook the woman's hand. I will, she said. I'll tell them. Then she turned and rushed down the steps out into the steely gray dusk. She hurried home through the shadowy streets, thinking only of Nellie and her sisters.